Hello, this is Danny from CG Dreams. Today I'm going to be covering some options that we have so that you can control data between Xpresso and the node system for Redshift. There will be times when you want to control multiple data at the same time, and what you'll find is that in the node-based system for Redshift you won't always have all of the nodes that you require for general Xpresso kind of control. So you need to be able to create a kind of link between Xpresso data and the node shading. Now, one scenario is this particular case, and I'll show you this because I've come across this when I was working on this project. And what it was I needed to be able to have a pose morph on this carp fish so that when the mouth opens it actually also controls simultaneously some shader information, which is actually the displacement map. So I've got a displacement map that's for when the mouth is in and when the mouth is out, and they're totally different displacement maps. So I need the post morphs to control the shader information between these two displacement maps. Now, a user from the C4D Xpresso asked me a question similar to this, and I showed them how that you can do this, and the way that I showed them was the way that at the time was the only way I knew how to do it, and that was simply just by going to your post morph, you right click on your post morph, and then you go to the expression set driver, then you go to your shader. In this particular case it's a displacement blender for Redshift, and then you right click on the blend weight and go expressions set driven absolute. Now you have to do this twice. You have to do, well, as many times as you've got a blend. I need it twice, so I had to do it twice, and then I had to merge the data between two Xpressos so that they were basically all in one, and I'll explain more about this in a minute. So that was one way of doing it. Now I was wondering whether there was another way to do it, a quicker way. Now the other way isn't really that much quicker, if I'm to be honest with you, but it may be quicker in other ways when you've got to do it in a more larger scale. So what we do in this particular case is we use user data, and user data is accessible via the node shader for Redshift, and it's accessible by means of what's called a scalar user data, as you can see here. So a scalar user data comes in like this, and you can just go to the basics and rename it. But what the most important thing is that you name the input correct, this attribute name. Now this attribute name is very important in the process, and I'll show you why. So that's assuming this circumstance that we have indeed got a pose morph. What we need to do is we need to link our pose morph to two user data sliders. Those user data sliders are then basically accessible within the node editor for the Redshift. So to do this, we just simply go onto the character in which it's all applied to. We go to user data, and you can see I've already added these two here. I'm going to show you how to do this. We could go to user data and click add data. I'm just going to add another one in there, and we can call this mouth open as an example. Change the interface to float slider, so it's a slider, and that's really it. Just leave it as it is. We're working between 0 and 100%, which is fine. You can change the different values in here, percentage, degree, etc. So there's different data types that you can use in here, but being that it's a slider to slider information and it's both working on the value between 0% and 100, that's absolutely fine. And I created two of these. Now what I did was I did very similar things to before. I just right clicked and set the morph as a driver, and then I would go to my user data, right click and set driven, right click and set driven for both of these. What it will do is it will create an Xpresso. It'll create two Xpressos, and they're pretty much identical. What you can do is you can select this was from the second Xpresso. You can select it, cut it and paste it into the other one so that you'll have this data. Now the result is something that I added. I'll explain in a minute why I did that. What you do is you then just connect your post morph up to both of the user data going through a range mapper, and you need to make sure that if you want one morph to merge in while the other morph is going to control the user data in the opposite way, you just need to change the range mapper values. So in this particular case, the value inside the editor for the displacement blender, you'll notice if I just deselect this for a second, you'll see that the values actually go between 0 and 1. See that? Go between 0 and 1. So that's something you need to take into account, what kind of data is going to be put in there. So we just go back and plug it back in again. Layer 1. So between 0 and 1, not 0% and 100%. For this reason, you need to make sure that your range mapper is set up correctly. We change it from the output range, and usually it's normally 0 to 100%, but we change it to 0 to 1 because that's what it is. It matches the same data as what we're controlling, what we're going to be controlling. And the other thing you need to change is the order. So when the mouth's closed, it's outputting 1. Yeah. When the slider's at one end, and when the slider's at the other end, it does the opposite. You can see there, just switch between the two. You've got the 1 at the top and the lower range, and in the outer range is 0, and this one here is the opposite. At the lower range is 0 and the upper range is 1. The result of this is when we move the slider, and I'll just show you this, I'll lock this screen. When you move the slider for the post morph, 1 goes up while the other one goes down. You need to get it the right way around within the range mapper so that, for instance, when the slider goes up, the mouth's open, and you can see it's operating the open slider user data, and then when you go down, it is operating the closed 100%. So it's in sync basically with the post morph. Once you've set this up and this is working correctly, what you need to do is create yourself 2 scalar user data and name them appropriately, but more importantly, in the attribute name you need to make sure that the name matches your user data. I've called it open and closed, so you can see in here I've typed in open and closed, and then it will look for user data named that, and it's creating this like invisible remote link to these, so that when you move the slider for the post morph, in turn it's moving the slider for the user data. User data is then inside our shader node, and it's plugged, in my particular case, to control the displacement blend weight. So that the result is that when I slide the post morph up, the mouth will open, and the displacement gets applied, as you can see there. When the morph is sliders down, then it will remove the displacement. You'll notice that all times, regardless which one it's on, there's always data, displacement data elsewhere. This could be a bump map, but in my particular case I use 3 displacement maps. So one of the displacement maps is actually plugged into the base, and if you notice here, the base here is on the input. It means it's applied 100% all the time, it's not going to change, whereas the other two, these other layers, layer 1 and layer 2, they are controlled on top of there by using the additive mode. So whichever one is turned on 100% is going to be added to the displacement that's already permanently plugged into the base. Now if this information in layer 1 or layer 2 also had the base data in there as well, in other words the high frequency data, then it would add to the high frequency data again what's already there for the base. So it's important in this particular case and setup that this mouth open and close sculpt data doesn't contain any high frequency detail. It's just the deformation that is necessary for the mouth area. So the reason why this may be a little bit quicker is because you can set up loads and loads of user data in here quite quickly within here. And once you've set this initial morph target up, you can pretty much link it up very, very quickly. It wouldn't take you long at all. So as an example here, say for instance you had quite a few in there, you could add another one. In fact, you can copy and paste these if you wanted to. You can copy, paste. I'm just going to change these slightly different. You get the idea. We've now got 4 sliders. All we have to do is go into here and add the extra data. It's already in there already. Of course, we haven't got no additional maps or anything like that, post morphs, but if you did have different post morphs, you could link them in there quite easily. So in this particular case, just to show you, we could hold down the control key, duplicate the range mappers, also have these connected up. We can duplicate these and just input them into a different input for the user data. So you can see here we've got closed 2, we've got open 2 as well, if that wasn't already used. Looks like I might have unplugged it. So you can see here anyway that you can just quickly add loads of user data in there, set it up as you want, control the range mapper as you would normally, set everything up the same as normal basically. The only difference is you don't have to start going through the process of individually right clicking on each individual one, selecting driver driven for each of these. It's not necessary to do that. You can create as many as you can, but you can imagine you would have to keep on going driver driven to each individual one that you create, which could be a bit time consuming. It's up to you which way you do it, but there's 2 ways that you can do it anyway. This might obviously open up other options and reasons for you to use this kind of method to create this remote scalar user data, remembering that by doing it this way, you've got this user data in there. You can obviously go off and start plugging this into other things, like you can control the displacement while you're controlling the color, the diffusion, a bump map. You can get this user data to control multiple things while it's inside the shader domain for the redshift. So I hope that opens up a couple of opportunities anyway. I'd like to thank the help that I got from the Redshift forum. One of them was Darby Edeline, hope I got that name right, and the other one was from Adrian, the administrator, who was helping me with this setup. So I hope it was useful to watch this video, and if you have any questions, of course, ask away and I can try to help. But thanks for watching. If you like, subscribe, please leave a comment if you like this, or even if you don't, let me know what you like and don't like. And bye for now, and see you soon.